Welcome to a new season of TechTalk. We may have started a bit later than usual, but it's for a good reason. We begin with a series of episodes that dive into critical infrastructure protection, a hot topic that should be on the minds of each one of us. The regrettable events that we are living through, particularly the war in Ukraine, as well as recent high profile cyber attacks on the energy industry, are putting critical infrastructure security in the spotlight. In short, critical infrastructure security is about the protection of systems, networks, and assets whose continuous operation is deemed necessary to ensure the security of a given nation, its economy, and the public's health and/or safety. To give us more details about this timely matter, we invited Simon Petitjean, Cybersecurity Director and Offensive Security and Red Team Leader, and Maxime Pallez, Security Senior Manager, who focuses on security governance at PwC Luxembourg. Let's dive right into it. Hi Armin, how are you today?
I'm great after such a long summer and so many things happening. I'm so happy to be back at work, actually.
Yes, me too. And for a new season.
Yeah, so we got an exciting season coming up. We really wanted to make a use of our many experts here at PwC, but also externally. So we'll have a few coming up. And I'm really interested to see how we can interpret what's going on around in the world through the lens of cybersecurity. And this topic seems particularly very interesting in the light of what's been going on in the past few weeks and also just this week.
That's right. And that's why we have today with us Simon and Maxime. Hi, Simon. Hi, Maxime. How are you?
Carla, fine, and you?
All good.
Hello, hello.
Are you ready to start to dissect today's topic?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, ready to kick
So,
off.
the first question is, what is critical infrastructure? I mean, why is it called critical, and what are the key critical infrastructure sectors?
Well, critical infrastructure refers to the assets that are essential for the functioning of a society, a country, or an economy. So it could be, for instance, assets related to public health, such as hospitals, water or energy supply, telecommunication, financial services, so a lot of assets. And they are considered as critical because of that. So you can easily imagine that if you shut down at least one of them, there will be a major impact on your daily life. But even worse than that, it could also have an impact on other critical infrastructure. In the case of a power outage, let's imagine, because an energy supplier failed to deliver his service, there will be hundreds of hospitals, banks, schools that will no longer be capable of serving their purpose. And more than having an impact on only one sector or one country, due to the fact that everything is interconnected today, in particular most of the infrastructures, it's very likely that it will also have an impact on the neighboring countries. So that's why we actually talk about critical infrastructure.
Well, yeah, I think that's clear why the critical in it. Um,
But
Armin-
then we add a word protection. And
right.
so what is critical infrastructure protection? Sounds fancy. But, what does it mean?
Well, the definition of what should be considered as critical infrastructure was actually the starting point of a longer-term strategy, where indeed, as you mentioned, you also need to protect yourself and to protect the infrastructure. So this initiative it started back into 2006 with the European Programme for Critical Infrastructure Protection, and it was reflected in each and every European Union member states soon after. And the goal is not only to state that this infrastructure needs to be protected, but also define operator security plans to perform risk analysis based on major threat scenarios and the vulnerabilities of each asset as defined earlier. So the final target is obviously to define countermeasures that will be leveraged in case of major crisis. For instance, we can also mention in a more local perspective in Luxembourg, the creation of the Haut Commissariat à la Protection Nationale, which been created solely for that purpose.
Yes, and if we look at the protection of critical infrastructure, that has become something that we could call a needed trend in society or at the international level in general, where we need to protect those infrastructure due to the digitalization of those organizations. In Luxembourg, in particular, while we have the national cybersecurity strategy that has been defined, it's nowadays the fourth edition of this strategy, and it's actually defined as one of its major objectives to strengthen the security and the resilience of those digital infrastructure in Luxembourg. And this document is actually public, and anyone can actually read it on the internet. It's really interesting to have a look at it. It's actually set up the priorities in Luxembourg in order to achieve this objective, and it addresses all the topics that you could imagine that are very trendy at the moment in the realm of security, where we have digital sovereignty, where we have resilience, protection against distributed denial of service attacks, and so on and so forth. So it's really a topic that is quite important at the moment.
Okay, that's clear. And well, how is cybersecurity related to critical infrastructure protection? I mean, in other words, how do cyber attacks affect infrastructure?
Well, in 2 words, it's quite easy. Digital transformation.
Haha.
It's a clever mix of making systems always easier to monitor, remotely manageable, and thus to make it more and more exposed to the internet. I think that we can all admit that with every great technology comes a new cyber risk, and there is no exception with critical security. You can easily observe how technology impacted telecommunication, finance, banking, but you would be extremely surprised to discover how deep it went into the health sector, for instance. Like, I can imagine that you heard about the hospitals that got targeted or hacked recently. And you know what? Some of them, they had to stop because of instruments, disinfector, and sterilizers. So it's appliance. Yeah, it's appliances that are connected to the network for traceability reason, because that's more convenient to do it remotely than manually keeping a track of everything that's been cleaned. And you need to keep a track of this for health and safety reason. So if your network is down due to cyber attack, well, this is not working anymore. And some of the hospitals, they had to reschedule surgeries because of that. And sometimes some vital ones, they had to send some patients to other hospitals because their life was threatened. And well, that's for hospital. And in a more industrial context, for instance, more and more factories, as you can imagine also, and plants are also connected to the internet or to internal networks, but still connected. And take a minute to think about the power production means, such as gas or electricity delivery, and well, put it into perspective with the current geopolitical situations that we are facing. Bit frightening, right?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, the more interconnected that we are, the more risks we have as well.
I think we saw that with the German rail operator just this week.
Exactly.
And over the weekend, where the whole region went without service because the critical infrastructure was not adequately protected.
And I think it's also something that we can see from a hacker's perspective, where we see a shift on their targets. They usually seems to attack most of the time the financial institutions in priority, because they were aiming to steal maybe some clients' information or confidential information, maybe some credit card data that they could be using on the internet. If we look at the type of attacks that we see nowadays, when either we are doing our incident response activities or when just reading on the internet, we can clearly see that they have changed their modus operandi, and they are now really targeting organizations which have no choice but to remain at 100% available or having a stable network. If we look at the example that was taken by Simon just a bit earlier on the hospital sector, and I believe that you have read that in the press, or you should have read that in the press. But a couple of years ago, we have actually seen the first death linked to the cybersecurity attack. So up until now, it was only, let's say, financial losses or maybe reputational impact. But a couple of years ago, actually, there was an hospital that was targeted by the ransomware attack. And those guys were not able to access the patient information. So that's the example that was taken by Simon. So they had to transfer this patient from one hospital to the other, and unfortunately, during the transfer, the patient actually just died. So we see indeed that nowadays, if we have some people targeting those critical infrastructure where impacts can be as huge as meaning people death, there is clearly a need in this sector in particular to actually improve their cybersecurity maturity. And up until now, critical infrastructure protection was a key topic, but was not really something that you would put at the priority or at the big boy table, let's say. And this type of news that we have seen recently, the death of people linked to cybersecurity attack, or the attacks on the power plant and so on. Well, it acted as kind of an electroshock in this world that was historically lagging a bit behind compared to the financial sector that we are more used to see in Luxembourg, especially in regards with cybersecurity maturity.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's where we are going, and that's where the world is going. So, in addition to classical terrorism, more organized, motivated, sneaky, and politically motivated threat actors are emerging. Plus, this type of attacks, it even leaves less clues about who performed an attack, which is also a great asset if we imagine an intelligence agency trying to destabilize an enemy. On a more positive note, because there is not only bad news, the good guys are also moving into that direction. So some week before, I had the opportunity to visit our PwC Experience Center in Frankfurt in Germany. And well, you probably heard about it in the communication, but they've built a full replica at a smaller scale, obviously, of a major industrial infrastructure, including pipelines, solar panels, water pumps. So some of the scenarios they showcased were about sabotage and what-if situation. Like, have you ever seen a hacker disable a heat or fire sensor on a gas pipeline? Well, personally, I did, and I can totally tell you that I don't want to live this situation in real life. But hopefully, the more prepared you get, the more you know the tactics, the techniques of your opponent, the better prepared you are.
What are the most common mistakes critical infrastructure sectors make when it comes to cybersecurity?
Well, it's not really a mistake. If we look at the past, historically, those sectors were less connected, less digital, and therefore less targeted by the cybersecurity attack. So it was never really a priority for them to actually protect their systems. Especially if we look and if we compare the cybersecurity versus the physical security part, or the safety of human, those last two were actually the target of organization, and they were trying to ensure that the safety of their workers plus the physical security not being stolen with very expensive materials. So it was rarely the priority in terms of investments, and it never actually reached the decision makers, or as I said, the big boy tables, where those decisions to invest in cybersecurity could be taken. Today, unfortunately, due to this, let's say, history, we can see that those sectors are a bit lagging behind and have underestimated, maybe the risk of cyber attack. And the gaps that they have on their systems, basically, they are the same as for any other sector. It's really maybe a lack of ownership in terms of management on who is actually responsible for security, and having the proper roles and responsibility defined, who should do what and how we should do it. Maybe a lack of training, lack of awareness, either at a management level, where they should actually push and have a top-down approach in regards with security, but also at the employee level, where nowadays in our sectors in Luxembourg, especially on the financial sector, again, to take this example, we have those mandatory training that we should follow. It's not really something that we see when discussing with our clients in those typical sectors. Then, obviously, I mean, people is okay, but then you need to protect from a technical point of view. Well, we also see a lack of the technical controls in place to secure their environments, whether it's the corporate environments, but also the production environments with those specific technologies and systems that are very specific to the critical infrastructure sector. And as we said, and a bit to their defense, actually, in the financial sector, especially in Luxembourg, there was always this foundation and those controls in the terms of regulation that were, let's say, mandatory for them to implement. I mean, we can't say a lot about regulation, but at least it gives the minimum requirements for implementing some security controls. If we look at the critical infrastructure sector, up to a couple of years ago, I mean, already in 2016 for the first NIS, and we will talk about that later, I guess, but it was very limited, the number of controls and the type of control that they should implement in regards with cybersecurity. So, as we said, regulatory compliance does not meet security, but at least it gives, let's say, the minimum and the foundation that are required for organization to really engage themselves in the cybersecurity journey.
Yeah, you're right. We will come back to regulation a bit later. But before that, well, by mentioning what is lacking today, you kind of already gave an answer to my next question, but probably there are other things. So how can critical infrastructure sectors better protect themselves? What are the tips and strategies that you could suggest?
Well, the tip and strategy are similar to the other sectors. Actually, it's not really something that we could have very specific to the critical infrastructure. What they need to do actually is to define their business priorities, to identify the risks, the cybersecurity risks, to mitigate those risks if they can, to control that they have properly implemented the controls, and increase their expectations, meaning that they will do another cycle of this exercise, just repeat what I've just said, and have this continuous improvement, let's say, posture to address the cybersecurity risks. So obviously, they will need to implement the standard and the minimum protection technologies and controls that every, let's say, sane organization should have at a minimum to protect against cyber risks. But they should also maybe switch to the detection and response part of the cybersecurity, let's say, framework. And maybe if I can speak to our audience, to the security responsible, well, you will need to be able to address all the issues, all the gap within the organization, while the criminals or the hackers, they only need one small lock for actually access your systems and your information, whether it's like an employee clicking on a link, or maybe you have an unpatched vulnerability on an exposed application that you were not aware of. So it's really a difficult game. And if I can take the analogy, the security responsible, well, he plays a dangerous equilibrist game where, I mean, if you fall, then it means that you have a compromised systems, but you also need, while remaining on the line, to juggle between the budget, the time constraints, the skill requirements of your team, the production constraints, which is very extremely important in this critical sector, and as well as the legacy and the proprietary technologies that on this particular sector is an extreme problem, because we have some systems and technologies that have not been patched or modified or updated since years even, and back in the days, the cybersecurity was not so much of a priority as it is today. So if we want to take the size of the security specialist of the critical infrastructure, it's a very different world compared to the one that we are used to when we work with, let's say, standard IT or corporate network and environments. In terms of solutions, even the solutions that are proposed by vendors, well, they are not sometimes not even compatible with these environments with, as I said, those proprietary systems and software. So it's really a very difficult game that they need to cope with. And again, similar to the other environments, in terms of recruitment even, in terms of competencies and skills that are needed to address the cybersecurity risks in this space, well, good luck to them, actually.
I really like the equilibrist game metaphor. Very, very nice, Maxime. Simon,
and Maxime mentioned something at the very beginning, so I would like to insist on it because it was extremely true. It's about training. It's key to success. Training your people, training your organization. You cannot always lower your exposure level, like disconnecting from the internet. It's rarely feasible nowadays. And thus, you cannot always lower the probability you'll get hacked or you will get attacked or targeted. But the harder you train, the lower the impact will be. And there is a very famous motto in the French military that says "Entraînement difficile, guerre facile," which literally means hard training, easy war. And this is true for a lot of subjects. This is also true for cybersecurity. And in that respect, you definitely need to periodically simulate attacks in a very realistic way. You heard about penetration tests, red teaming, you name it, a lot of buzzwords, but you really need to do it and to do it for the good reason, which are improving your detection and response capability, once again, as Maxime explained.
And sorry to interrupt, Simon, and your team does that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the type of service we propose. And on top of that's very important when we do this type of simulation, that we do it in a very realistic way. It's very important, and I must admit more and more common to also leverage on threat intelligence to scope our exercise. Like if you want to protect your critical infrastructure in the energy sector, you need to know what's the current threat landscape in that specific sector. Who are the attackers? How they proceed? And well, cybercrime is moving so fast that you just cannot only rely on information that used to be true over the past months. You need to know what's happening now and and be capable of anticipating. You know, we had a talk like last year about ethical hacking and stuff. Everything that I say is still true, but things evolved. So you have to keep up to date to be at least or to be able to deliver interesting simulations.
Exactly. So basically, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the attackers and to anticipate what their next moves will be, like a chess game.
Nice. Let's have a look into a fear topic, but a crucial one, and that would be the regulation. Maxime, can you walk us and our listeners through the main legislation at EU and Luxembourg level? So what are the regulations, and if you could briefly explain them to us, and what do we need to know and why do we need to know it? So this could be mainly from, let's say, the client perspective.
Yes, well, a feared topic indeed, but crucial. I think that's the right term to use. Well, regulation is obviously not something that everyone actually just like, but it's something that is vital for organization, as I said, and as I said earlier in the previous question on the financial sector versus the critical infrastructure sectors. We see one sector that is more advanced in terms of regulation compared to the other, and maybe this is something that actually helped the financial sector to actually improve their cybersecurity posture. For the critical infrastructure part, the main thing that comes to mind is the NIST directive, obviously, and especially the new version that is currently being discussed and yet to be adopted. This directive actually just aim at bringing a common level of cybersecurity in the EU for the critical infrastructure. And well, it's the first directive actually was issued I think 2016, and so the new directive obviously aims to replace and to improve and to solve a bit the issues that were created by this first directive, and actually it extends the scope of the impacted industry of the directive by adding some new sectors into the scope of the regulation, and especially the telecommunication sectors. nowadays, I mean, you cannot live obviously without internet, without connection. So this is something that has become very crucial and is becoming the target of this new directive. Now, if we deep dive a bit onto the directive, well, some key concepts of cybersecurity are addressed, and obviously those are the standard one that you may expect. The first one being risk management, and that's something that organization would need to actually assess their cybersecurity risks and obviously do something about those risks. Incident management and incident reporting, more importantly. Important, why? Because quite similar to very famous and known privacy regulation that was issued a couple of years ago, so obviously the GDPR. Well, it introduces the concept of reporting the cybersecurity incident to a local regulator within a very short time frame, 24 hours. So you have 24 hours to report when you are becoming aware of a cybersecurity incident on your system. You need then to report that to the regulator. So you can imagine that in terms of process, of preparation, of gathering information, it's going to create some new struggle for organizations that were not prepared before and that have not implemented those processes and control before. This directive also introduces the concept of fine, and entities that are failing to comply with the organizational and technical measures that are introduced by the directive, they may face up to 2% of their annual global turnover as a penalty. So we can say that we got a discount compared to the GDPR that, it's 4%. But you can imagine that for those critical infrastructure that up till now did not invest too much into cybersecurity, while it's something that is really going to matter for them and that they really need to ensure that they are going to be compliant with this directive to avoid this fine.
It's very interesting. And I guess that, well, it makes sense that as the situation is evolving and getting more complex, so does the regulation needs to adapt accordingly. I do have a question. Do you have any idea, any indication of when this updated directive will be enforced?
Well, it has been under discussion for quite some time now. So I guess that it should be adopted into the next months. I'm not aware of a definitive date on which this directive will need to be involved. But what obviously I would do is to recommend the listeners and the critical infrastructures to actually have a look at the current version of this directive, which is available, and already start preparing for implementation of those controls. Obviously, the regulators will give some times for implementation, but the sooner you start, the sooner you're going to become compliant. But more importantly, the sooner you are going to address the cybersecurity risks that you have.
Yeah, and you'll be protected.
Yeah.
Well,
and hopefully you'll be protected.
Hopefully, exactly. But it does make sense what you're saying. I think that they should start now, sooner rather than later, because seems like it's going to shake things up. And there are some fines involved, so they don't want to have to incur into that.
And above all, it's about providing a service to society, right? Because if you have, critical infrastructure and companies that provide public good, going out of service for extended periods of time, as we've seen that happen in US, for example, that's really, it becomes critical. So.
Indeed. Well, we are coming to an end, but before we say goodbye for now, we have one last question for you, Simon and Maxime. What is the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this episode?
Well, I would conclude on the fact that unfortunately, over the past few years, we went through an incredible sequence of unbelievable situations that no one could ever foresee. This was the case for almost each and every part of our life, including cybersecurity. So there were a lot of chain reactions that also demonstrated that our critical infrastructure are now at the heart of the modern conflicts. We've been suffering the weight of the legacy of systems that no one dared to touch because it was critical, and now we have to strongly refactor and rethink them because they are critical. So I guess it's about time to change our mindset and think of cybersecurity as a minimum vital requirement for at least everything that has a significant impact on our daily life.
Well, on my side, maybe well, we had a focus on this talk about the regulation, but I also want our listeners to remember that governance is not only about regulation and not about becoming compliant with the regulation. The absolute aim of governance is to identify the risks and to find the right balance between investments into cybersecurity and the costs of the risks of the cybersecurity risks. And we can have some examples of organizations that have invested too much into cybersecurity and that might not be competitive enough or might actually have prevented some business opportunities to further develop and grow. And well, as security professionals, and more importantly, as security consultants, we obviously would like to see the investment into this sector, into the teams flowing as much as possible, because we would like to have as much as technology, to have as much as control, as much as team members into cybersecurity. But we need to remember that cybersecurity at the organizational level is one domain. It's one domain where if you invest too much, potentially you may not be able to invest in other areas. It's a right balance between the investments and the risks. That's really something that I would like the people to remember. But obviously, I mean, cybersecurity is one of those domains where potentially you could have a black swan type of event that could completely shut down your business. And we see in the press some example of that. So while it is the right balance to find, well, still the risk needs to be handled carefully.
Strong words.
Yeah.
Strong last messages.
What a way to end an episode.
Yes. But thank you very much, Maxime and Simon. Very, very interesting conversation. And
thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule. We really appreciate it. And I hope that our listeners will
too.
too.
For the opportunity to talk.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that we will have the opportunity to make another episode again.
Yes, of course, Simon. I'll be happy to.
Well.
Okay, thank you very much. And have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.
And that's all for today. This is Tech Talk, technology made simple over a cup of coffee. Don't miss out on any future episodes by hitting subscribe. Thank you for listening, and until the next episode.